Today I'm going to read another segment on doing ethics well, legality versus morality. Ethics. It is interesting, but there's a whole lot more to it than just thinking. Hi, I'm Dr. Simpson, and welcome to Learn with GS. This channel is geared towards educating persons who are interested in introductory college courses and advanced placement high school courses through reading textbooks. So, classes have started. Let's continue reading on ethics. Doing ethics well, legality versus morality. Moral questions are distinct from legal questions, although, of course, moral issues might have some implications for the law. That child labor is morally unacceptable might mean that we have a law against it, but it is unhelpful to answer whether something is morally right or wrong by looking to the laws of the land. It is quite easy to see why. Imagine a country which has a set of actions which are legally acceptable, but morally unacceptable, or vice versa. The well-used example of Nazi Germany brings to mind this distinction. Therefore, in discussions about ethics, do be wary of talking about legal issues. Much more often than not, such points will be irrelevant. Doing ethics well. Prudential reasons versus moral reasons. Something to keep separate are moral reasons and prudential reasons. Prudential reasons relate to our personal reasons for doing things. Consider some examples. When defending slavery, people used to cite the fact that it supported the economy as a reason to keep it. It is true, of course, that this is a reason. It is a prudential reason, particularly for those who benefited from slavery, such as traders or plantation owners. Yet such a reason does not help us with the moral question of slavery. We would say, okay, but so what if it helps the economy? Is it right or wrong? Doing ethics well. Prescriptive versus descriptive claims. Another important distinction is between descriptive and prescriptive claims. This is something referred to as the is versus ought gap. We return to this in later chapters, especially chapter 6, but it is such a common mistake made in general ethical chat that we felt the need to underline it. Consider some examples. Imagine the headline: Scientists discover a gene explaining why we want to punch people wearing red trousers. The article includes lots of science showing the genes and the statistical proof, yet none of this will tell us whether acting violently towards people wearing red trousers is morally acceptable. The explanation of why people feel and act in certain ways leaves it open as to how people morally ought to act. Consider a more serious example relating to the ethics of eating meat. Supporters of meat eating often point to our incisor teeth. This shows that it is natural for us to eat meat, a fact used as a reason for thinking that it is morally acceptable to do so. But this is a bad argument. Just because we have incisors does not tell us how we morally ought to behave. It might explain why we find it easy to eat meat, and it might even explain why we like eating meat. But this is not relevant to a moral question. Don't you believe us? Imagine that dentists discover that our teeth are designed to eat other humans alive. What does this tell us about whether it is right or wrong to eat humans alive? Nothing. Doing ethics well. Thought experiments. You will also be aware, especially in reading this book, of the philosophical device known as a thought experiment. These are hypothetical, sometimes fanciful examples that are designed to aid our thinking about an issue. For example, imagine that you can travel back in time. Imagine that there is a tram running down a track. You could stop it, thereby saving 5 people by throwing someone under the tracks. Is this the morally right thing to do? The details here are unimportant. What is important is that it is inadequate to respond, yes, but that could never happen. Thought experiments are devices to help us to think about certain issues. Whether they are possible in real life does not stop us doing that thinking. Indeed, it is not just philosophy that uses thought experiments. When Einstein asked what would happen if he looked at his watch near a black hole, this was a thought experiment. In fact, most other subjects use thought experiments. It is just that philosophy uses them more frequently, and they are often a bit more bizarre. Doing ethics well. Understanding disagreement. Finally, we want to draw your attention to a common bad argument as we want you to be aware of the mistake it leads. Imagine that a group of friends are arguing about which country has won the most Olympic gold medals. Max says China, Alistair says the US, Dean says the UK. There is general ignorance and disagreement, but does this mean that there is no answer to the question of which country has won most Olympic gold medals? No. We cannot move from the fact that people disagree to the conclusion that there is no answer. Now, consider a parallel argument that we hear far too often. Imagine that you and your friends are discussing whether euthanasia is morally acceptable. Some say yes and others say no. Each of you cite how different cultures have different views on euthanasia. Does this fact that there is disagreement mean that there is no answer to the question of whether euthanasia is morally acceptable? Again, the answer is no. That answer did not follow in the Olympic case, and it does not follow in the moral one either. So, just because different cultures have different moral views, this does not show by itself that there is no moral truth and no answer to the question. If you are interested in the idea that there is a lack of moral truth in ethics, then moral error theorists defend exactly this position in the chapter on metaethics. Summary. So what are we hoping to learn today? You will not be assessed on the core content of this chapter. If any of the content is specifically relevant to assessment, it is discussed in proper detail in the following chapters. That's the first thing. Still, we hope that we have signposted some errors to avoid when it comes to thinking about ethics and some strategies to consider instead. It might be worth occasionally revisiting the ideas discussed here during your studies to test your own lines of argument and evaluate how thinking well is progressing for you. This would not be a weakness. Both the authors and any honest philosopher can reassure you, philosophy is hard. We hope you find this textbook useful and rewarding in helping you on your own journey through ethics. In our next section, we'll read Part 1, Normative Ethics,